It's Chelsea,
It's Nina,
and you're in the Critics' Kingdom. Hello, everyone. This week we're going to be reviewing the classic. We will have to tell you in the review how much we did to watch this movie.
It was not
Kim
easy.
Possible. A Sitch in Time.
Yeah, it
not
came
easy,
out in.
Nina.
It was very, very difficult. Well, I mean, it was actually as difficult as watching anything was pre 2010, but still, it's been a solid decade of all I got to do is press a button, so that was an experience. But yeah, this was the first Kim Possible Disney Channel original movie, and it came out in 2003. And it was a beloved show, just deeply beloved, and we were super excited to get to watch it this week, and now tell you guys all about it.
Yes. Get into the recap.
Let's go, Chelsea. I got you. Okay, so we begin this film with cheer practice. Kim and her, Kim and the squad, like, it's the first cheer practice before the new school year, and they're killing it. Like, they're just getting it. Really shout out to the animators on this one. Like, animated choreography, I'm sure, is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but it looks so good. I was like, this is a routine I want to learn, so that's great. So yeah, they have their cheer practice. Ron, Kim is the cheer captain. Ron is the mascot, which is like Mad Dog, so he's at the practice too. And when they leave practice, they're essentially walking home, and Ron is talking about how excited he is for the new school year. They're apparently taking Latin and like a bunch of other cool classes, and he just like feels in the zone. He's like, this is going to be the best year, and Kim agrees. But then they get to Ron's house and they see that there's a for sale sign in front of it. And not only is there a for sale sign, in fact, it has been sold. And we find out that Ron and his family are moving to Norway in like 2 days because his mom got a job transfer and she's taken it. And they decided to wait until they were moving. They were literally getting like on a plane to tell Ron, because they figured it'd be easier for him that way if it just came as a full-on shock, which is obviously not the case. Please stop lying to your children, just across the globe. It doesn't help anybody. But so they're moving to Norway, and like Kim and Ron are both like, oh no, like we have literally been together since preschool. Like this is gonna be rough. But they sort of resolve that, like they're not gonna let their friendship fall apart, and that they're going to make saving the world together work, even though Ron is moving literally halfway across the world. So we essentially then see moments of them trying to do that. But it's just like, it's not really working. Ron is constantly showing up late, and Kim like tries to find like a new partner sidekick situation in Monique, her friend Monique, who just isn't equipped to do this yet because she she hasn't been running around saving the world. And so they're both just sort of feeling that the team might not be functional anymore, and that's apparent because the missions keep failing. But what we're seeing in these failed missions is that, strangely enough, like when she goes to the first mission that she goes to try and stop is Duff Killigan stealing, this artifact, but she sees that, Monkey Fist is there and Draken is there. So like, which are three of the big villains of the show. And the idea is like, okay, this is weird. Like, it's not just one villain doing, their own little thing. All of these villains are working together. And so she essentially finds out from Wade, who's like her. There's a word that's used for this usually, but it's like her person behind the screen, like her person who does like all the computer stuff and tells her where she needs to go and all of that. And he is essentially like, it looks like they're trying to get all of the pieces of the Tempest Simia, the statue, together, and like they shouldn't get that. No one like knows what it does, but it's like this important artifact, and like it shouldn't happen. So so they go to try to steal the head of it, and like She tries to go and stop them with Monique. Ron shows up late again, doesn't work. They get the head, and then they get to like bring it to this temple, and they use it. So they essentially are able to do what they need to do. And but Kim is like sort of more concerned with the fact that like her and Ron just aren't working right now. And in like at home they sort of have a conversation, and they, virtual conversation, where they sort of admit to each other that, this isn't working, and it seems like the team sort of just officially needs to break up, and Ron has to like accept his new life in Norway, and they have to like just stop working on missions together because, they can't keep letting the bad guys win, and they have to save the world, and that's the best way to save the world. So Kim's kind of sad about that, but in her so she's like doing her Latin homework, and she realizes that Tempus Simia means time monkey in Latin. And then Rufus 3000, Rufus is, Ron's naked mole rat, a very buffed up version of Rufus, shows up from the future. And he's essentially like, Kim, you must go back into the time stream and stop the Supreme One from gaining power, because he's gained power and he's made the future horrible. It's a terrible place to live. And Kim was like, oh snap, like that's crazy, but how am I going to do that? Like, I don't have a way to do that. I don't have a partner anymore, like all this stuff. And he's like, here's a chrono manipulator. It allows you to travel through time. Right now, the time stream is in a place of flux. So you can go back into the past and like stop them from doing from ruining you in the way that they're trying to, so that they can ultimately have power. So, we check in with the villains, and we essentially see that like, Draken, Monkey Fist, and Duff Killigan, their plan is to go to the moments or to the specific moment where Kim Possible is the most vulnerable to, as Dragon puts it, crush her spirit so that she will later not have the confidence to be able to be like a child spy and save the world from all of their evil plans. So the first thing that they do is that they go to her first day of preschool, because they're just like, we'll crush her spirit then. And they have this like device that ages them down. So now all three of them are toddlers, and they just go to school with her and they bully her. Like they pull her hair, they steal her ball and all of this stuff. And it's really horrible. And she's like starting to cry and she feels bad. But then Ron shows up, like toddler Ron shows up, and he's like, hey now, preschool has rules. You can't behave this way. Leave her alone. Be nicer. And he essentially just like defends her and sticks up for her. And it's just like bullying is bad. And it's super, super cute. And so like they're fundamentally foiled, because Kim shows like present day Kim shows up via her chrono manipulator and like fights Shigo a bit, and like just manages to foil their plans, and like they turn back into their adult selves. So they're like, crap, we have to choose a different moment. So the next moment that they go to is going to be like her first mission. But meanwhile, Ron, like in his nostalgic state in present day Norway, was flipping through a book, and he noticed that like the picture of him in preschool changed, and he saw like baby versions of like these other people, the villains there. And he was like, whoa, something's afoot. So he essentially figures it out as well, and he also manages, like he shows up late, but he manages to show up at this moment too, where the idea is that like they're trying to make sure that her first mission fails when she's like 13, and they try to do, and we see that like what happened was she created a website to like babysit, but on it she says that she can do anything, and then she gets called in because of a mistyping of a URL, gets called in to like get a rare cuddle buddy from like a laser beam situation, and she has the skills to do that because of like cheerleading and flexibility. She can flip through these laser beams, and Ron is like, listen, your website says you can do anything, so you should do anything. Preteen Ron says that's a preteen Kim Possible, so they go to do it. The villains show up with this like giant rock monkey that they're trying to like hurt her with, but real-time Kim is there, real-time Ron is there, and they're just like, they and their preteen selves foil the villains again. But what they don't see happen is that Shigo, who plays Draken's sidekick, actually manages to like grab the time monkey and like disappear. And Rufus 3000 shows back up and he's like, guys, like the Supreme One is still ruling. You guys have to go to the future now. And they're like, what do you mean? And they essentially figure out that the Supreme One, who they assumed was a reference to Draken, is actually a reference to Shigo. And they have to go. So, like, because the time stream is still in flux, it's okay if they go into the future. They won't change it too much. So they go into the future and they see that the world is. It's very reminiscent of like the Phineas and Ferb movie, where the world is just, it's a totalitarian dictatorship. There's no individuality. And they literally get pulled, like, they get taken to a facility to get them to stop thinking and stop being individuals. And so they see like the depths of Shigo's control. But in that space, they get busted out by the twins, Kim Possible's little brothers, Jim and Tim, who are now like, 25 or like, like 35 and like buff and like, not 35, they're like 30 and like buff and like they've been fighting the resistance and they like essentially break them out and they're like, okay, like here's what's up. Mom and dad are living on the moon. There was an exodus to the moon, so they're cool and they know that you're okay because like they know that you've just been lost in the time stream. And here's our resistance crew, and they like team up with Wade, who's like also now like big and buff in the future. And Ron is like, why does everybody look like this? I feel puny. And it's like, dude, fighting supervillains, it's tough. It'll build you up. And Monique shows up, and it's essentially now we have like a future resistance crime fighting team, and they hatch a plan to like go through the sewers to get to Shigo's citadel, where they're going to try to steal the time monkey back. Obviously, the usual hijinks ensue, where it's like they make it, but then they get caught, and then they have to fight their way out. And like Kim and Ron like sort of reconcile and realize that like everything's better together. And Shigo sort of announces that the way that she was ultimately able to do this was that we figure out she was the one who actually sent Ron to Norway by like making his mother get this new job, because she realized that the reason that they couldn't stop Kim is because her and Ron made such an unbeatable team. And the only way to stop them or to win in the end was to split them up. So that's what she did. And so they realize that and they're like, oh, snap. Then they get the time monkey and they're able to just like reset everything. And so then we go back to the very, very beginning of the movie where they're leaving school and there's this like weird rumble thing. And we watch them like leave school and walk home and there's no for sale sign outside of Ron's house. And they have no recollection of like these events that have happened because the time machine has been reset to what it's supposed to be. Kim Possible, Ron Stoppable, doing their thing, about to have a great school year, keep fighting crime, keep saving the world. And that is the Kim Possible movie, A Stitch in Time.
And we will be right back with the review. So, to get into the review, I feel like we would be remiss not to bring up that Kim Possible was iconic television. Just in general, one of, I'd say, the best cartoons Disney has ever made, or the best animated shows. Christy Carlson Romano truly did her thing. So did Will Friedle playing Ron. I mean, we had Raven, Kirsten Storms, like
it was a dynamite cast.
Was stacked, like
incredible. Like talk about childhood icons.
And I feel like that's one of the reasons that it lasted so long, because especially during this time, Disney shows didn't tend to last. And still now, I don't think they really go beyond normally like 3 seasons. And Kim Possible ran from like 2002, I think, to 2007.
Yeah.
Which is a long time. And I think had 4 or 5 seasons. And yeah, it was one of the best shows. It was also one of the, I feel like, first ones that kind of married the idea that you can be more than one thing. I think we've constantly talked about that on this podcast, how a lot of the DComs tend to be like, high school is a silo. And like you're either really smart or you're really athletic or you're just like, some super weird gamer kid or whatever. Like, and instead, like Kim Possible is great because it kind of shows you that you can be all things. You are every woman, to quote Shaka Khan. And she's a cheerleader by the day and James Bond spy at night. And I feel like it was one of the shows that really like did all those things and did it really well. and really hammered home the point that, especially for teen girls, that you can be whatever you want to be. You can be a mix of things. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, and it was a show that I like always remember. I appreciate it in the way, kind of, we talked about Phineas and Ferb on this podcast before, and I think I appreciate it in a similar sort of way, and maybe even arguably like when we had discussions about the Proud Family. But it's just like the writing was so strong, and it's a very interesting thing. I sort of like mentioned it to Chelsea, as we were watching it, that when I think about some of Disney's like most prolific and interesting program, it often lives in an animated space. And this is like, like she said, extremely iconic show that, it's a female protagonist at its like at the helm, but it was definitely like a show that like I was watching with my male cousins or my male friends, and those were the same boys watching like Teen Titans, and I was watching Teen Titans. It's like this weird thing, the original, not the thing that's on TV now. Not
the
that.
live action one.
It's not even live action. It's just like not. It's just.
Oh,
like,
did they make another
dumb.
animated one? Because they have
it's
a live action one too.
No, I don't even want to know what that looks like. But it's it's an anime one that exists now, and like my issue with it is that it's like not intelligent, which like sounds pretentious, but the other teen, like it's like they do like fart jokes, you know what I mean? And it's like, but that's not like Teen Titans was supposed to be about like kids fighting crime, like the baby Justice League fighting crime.
Yeah.
And like all of the ways that they were going through like high school stuff and being groomed to fight crime and all this, and like and they did it really well, and like the new one doesn't do that at all. It's like it's aimed at much younger kids. It's aimed at like 4-year-olds as opposed to like 10, 11-year-olds, where like the original Teen Titans sort of lived in. I digress. The point being though is that like I think this is it was one of those shows that falls into this category of like very free animated spaces where, and I don't know why animation gets to do this in a way that live action doesn't. Maybe it's because of that, because it's animated and they aren't real people that we're watching or real actors that we're watching. There's a little bit more of suspension of direct relation, and therefore you're more willing to see yourself or see reflections in people that like, or like characters that aren't technically you, and therefore certain rules or certain tropes or certain sort of societal boxes that usually have to be checked, quote unquote, don't need to be checked in animation as often. And so there's more room to play with what a character can be, or what roles a character can fulfill, or what storylines can be discussed, because it's not real people on the screen.
Right.
And I think that that's part of what made this show such a beloved show, is that it was, like all of us kids found something in it, but even beyond that, like all of us kids could have a good time watching it. And it wasn't as gendered as like other shows were.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think especially during this time when it came out in 2002, I think we brought this up before on the podcast, but there's this Nickelodeon documentary called what is it?
Or the Orange Years?
Yeah, the Orange Years. That's on, or was on Hulu. I'm not sure if it's still there. But they do talk about in it how it was a common thought in the entertainment industry in like the early mid 90s that girls will watch shows with boy protagonists, but boys would not do the same thing with women protagonists. So it was actually a really big thing with Nickelodeon when they created The Secret World of Alex Mack and Clarissa Explains It All, because they basically disproved that whole theory. And I think that's also one of the reasons that it made way for a lot more female protagonists in a lot of children's media. So obviously Kim Possible came, maybe like a decade, maybe a little bit less than a decade after that, but it definitely was helped by it. And I do think it's just useful to bring up because I feel like people forget or don't know about that. So it's just important to kind of put it in the context to the time that it was in and how important and impactful it was. And yeah, I mean, I loved the show so much. I think you were also saying yesterday, Nina, when we were watching it, that you loved it because it was observational humor that
Yeah.
is typically used. And that's also one of the things I just appreciate about Disney in general is that their animated shows never relied on the same type of comedy. Like it's like the comedy of this is very different than the comedy in the Proud Family, which was a lot more grounded in like current cultural trends and current,
Yeah.
things that are going current events. Um, and this one is like you kind of learn the characters and you kind of figure out their individual quirks. And the more you watch it, the funnier it is because you know them very well, which I think happens with a lot of shows, but it really shows up in this one. Um, and you just like learn to recognize little things. Like I know one of our favorite phrases that they said in the show all the time, but especially said in here was like calling Ron a buffoon.
Yeah.
Like constantly
Like
whenever he
Draken
showed
is
up.
always calling him a buffoon, but it's extra funny because you know Draken's a buffoon. Like
Right.
you're watch it's I mean it's really interesting to think about how like I think that there are very direct relationships between this show and Phineas and Ferb, but
Mm-hmm.
like in that way, it's like in the same way that like Doctor Doofenstein, whatever his name is, I always like pronounce it
Doofenshmirtz.
slightly wrong. Different Doofenshmirtz, that's what it is. Like the way that he's like clearly a moron. It's like in Kim Possible, Draken, who was like the main big villain, was clearly a moron, and it was heightened by the fact that like his sidekick Shigo was like very aware of that fact and like was always just like, why do you have to be like literally in this? She's like, why do you have to be a toddler? Like, why don't you just go? Like, why do y'all have to be? This is dumb. Or like he explains the plan at first, and she's like, oh, that's actually a pretty good plan. And then he morphs himself into a toddler. She's like, never mind, never mind. But it's like that kind of, and that becomes a direct like foil to like Kim and Ron's relationship, where like yes, like on the surface, like Ron is kind of like not the most. He's very klutzy, and he loves his nachos. He's seemingly not the most like useful of sidekicks, but he's actually significantly better at like the whole situation, and they have a better partnership than like Draken and Cheeto. So it's like the way that things are layered on top of each other. Um, that's like really like it's fun. It becomes very very funny, and it is recognizable to kids, which I think is also important. I think it was a show that didn't talk down to children or didn't assume that they wouldn't understand the layers or wouldn't get the references.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that like, well, Phineas and Ferb's a little different with references, but like it just and it like created its own slang, which was
Yeah,
pretty
it
like
did.
when
I
I was
mean,
like, oh yeah,
people.
like oh what's the sitch? Like I don't think I like we didn't say that before this show. I don't think. Maybe
I'm
we
trying.
did, but
I don't. I mean, the thing is also we were so young, so I truly have no
that's
idea what the
true.
teenagers were saying
You're
in
right.
'02.
You're right.
But I mean, like people still have "Call Me, Beat Me" as their ringtones, and nobody
Yeah,
has ringtones in 2021. Like
exactly.
that was legitimately a very popular ringtone when the Razors came out.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
like
the pink razor. Oh,
the
the pink razor.
like we
Yeah.
still know people who have that. That like the show is literally imbued into our culture as millennials.
Yeah.
And you just can't understate the impact of it. And then I think even like the side characters on here were really good. Like we talked about like Raven voicing Monique, and how she had natural hair. And granted, it clearly looked like it was 3B or 3C, but still, this was like that meant in 2002 nobody was wearing natural, like, unless you were part of like a certain, there were obviously always Black people wearing their natural hair, but it was not normalized to the point that it is now. um so I think that was also like a really big part as well, that it's like she was going around with two afro puffs essentially. um and it makes a big difference in just how you notice it, because I had completely forgotten about it, honestly. until we watched it yesterday, and I was like, oh, I forgot that she has like actual curly hair. It's not like straight.
Yeah, and I think even like and I forgot about this till I watched it yesterday too, like how her little brothers were like I always remember that she had like twin little brothers and they were like kind of weird and annoying.
Yeah.
But I forgot that like it was like they were weird and annoying, but they were geniuses. Like they were like it's like because there's a part at the top of the film where like when they come into the kitchen, and I guess it's part of the thing, like they break things a lot. But they come into the kitchen and they have like this thing. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna go launch this thing," and their mom was like, "I told you not to use rocket fuel in the house." And then the rocket goes through the roof, and she's like, "You see, you see, Jim and Tim, please stop with the rocket fuel in the house." But it's like the rocket fuel in the house like makes perfect sense, and like she comes from a family of like scientists. Like it's very, I don't know. It's just like those were all things that I like forgot layered rewatched it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like super fun to see again and to experience again. And the movie I think itself is pretty like it's interesting that we watched Phineas and Ferb before we watched this one.
Yeah.
Because like now I'm putting it in context of like the Phineas and Ferb film because the plot lines are eerily similar.
Mm-hmm.
But like, this came first. But like I think that I feel like this is probably one of the first iterations of time travel that I dealt with as a kid. Like it was like this in like the third Harry Potter book.
Yeah.
Like that like introduced time travel as like concepts to me. And then of course later we get like, like Phil of the Future and like there are things that come up later that like capitalize on like the trend of time travel that still exists now. But yeah, like this was I feel like when it came out, it was super cool. And I think that's
Yeah.
why even in our choice, like, we're only doing a selection of the Disney Channel original movies. If y'all love it, we could do part two. But we're only doing a selection of them. And why we specifically chose, we were like, we have to do the first Kim Possible Disney Channel original movie, even if we don't do the other two, because it was very well received. I remember loving it as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it was one of the like, at least for that span of time, one of the like earlier popularized versions of time travel for children.
Mm-hmm. No, I would agree. I definitely would agree. Yeah, because I'm even trying to think of like other ones around this time period. I can't think of anything either. So
There's a lot
yeah.
of realm travel, like
Yeah.
Dragon Tales and Narnia,
Right.
but like, but like not necessarily. Like we had concepts of like the parallelity of universes or like going into storybooks and things like that. But I don't know if like time travel itself of like going through your own timeline
Right.
was really popularized quite yet. Like it was beginning to happen, but this might have
Mm-hmm.
been one of our earlier interactions with that. And they do it well.
It does. No, they actually do it very well. I would argue actually better than Phineas and Ferb personally.
Yeah, no, I think I do too. I think it was more solid and and I think it's part of it is because of like that humor that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my favorite quotes in it, and that I wrote down. I was like, I have to use this in general, like in life, but that they, if we were recalling correctly, used to use a lot in the promos for this film, like on Disney Channel, was when Ron says, like towards the end of the movie, he's like, or like in the middle of the film, he's like, time travel. It's a cornucopia of disturbing concepts. like, um, like it was very sort of self-aware, and it did a good job of being like, oh, like it explained very quickly and very easily, like why you're not screwing up your own timeline.
Right.
For that 10-year-old who was like, wait a minute, but if you do that, then now nothing is the same.
Right.
Like that 10-year-old who gets there. They were like, oh, but the time stream is in flux. All is in flux right now until it is fundamentally decided. So there you go.
You know what I just noticed though? We never met older Kim. But I just thought about that.
Well, because she, like, I assumed that she was eliminated. Like, her, like, older Ron and older Kim were eliminated.
Yeah,
At
because they
some
were
point.
stuck in the time stream. I know. I was just thinking about it because I was like, we met pretty much everybody else that was, you know,
Yeah.
grown up, including Huge Wade, which that was I completely
Ron was
forgotten
so
about
upset.
that.
He was like, "Why is everybody so large?
Why did they put in the food?
This is crazy. I have been fighting crime for at least 2 years, and I don't look like that. This is
You know
not
what's
okay."
actually crazy though? Thinking about it now, if you put this in context of the time period, that would have put them probably at around 2020,
Yeah.
2023. Like it would have been within the next couple of years.
Shigo is Trump.
Which is funny. Yeah, Shigo was literally Trump. Which is just funny to think about.
Lols.
But yeah, no, I think another part, they had some great, I mean, in general, they had some great quotes in here. Something else that I thought was interesting was also the fact that they had severely underestimated Shigo, which is ironic because she's the main one that Kim is constantly fighting. She almost never fights Draken because, again, dumb. Shigo is like her equal almost in terms of like, you know, the actual ability and like intelligence. So it's like so funny that they underestimated Shigo, and then Kim even says at one point when one of the souped up naked mole rat you know, futurelings that all look like weird naked mole rat versions of the Rock. They're like, why didn't you go after Shigo? I thought I told you, like, you know, it's gonna be a mastermind that does it. And she was like, I don't know, I just thought like power was like a guy thing.
Yeah.
Like actually having power. And I'm just like, this is so funny because you were literally doing, like we said earlier, you're basically in what would typically be a like male role or assigned to be a male role, but like, and you know that, but it's like, even with that, the patriarchy has still seeped in, and you still think that actually having like overarching power of everybody and anyone is still something that only a man could actually pull off.
Or like even beyond that, like there's that whole thing about how if women were to rule the world, like all the wars would end, you know, and like the idea that like women would create a utopia. It's like women can be dictators too, like for sure. There are definitely households across the country and across the globe where what mommy says goes, right? Like that's a real thing. Like the idea of just even if we have power, like it's a different form of power. The feminine power is like kinder and gentler. It's like power is power, bro.
I mean, hello, we all know Margaret Thatcher.
Exactly.
Like, let's be honest here.
The Iron Lady, man.
Truly, like, and you actually real. Like, there's a reason that a lot of even white women in England could not stand that woman. Like,
it's like, wait a minute.
We could not stand her. But yeah, I do think that there is a very interesting like gender binary that tends to happen where people take it like everybody takes it too far and then like forgets that like at the end of the day everybody is human and power corrupts.
Yeah.
No matter like what your you know preferred gender is. So it's yeah, that's always weird. Just that like whole idea, and so it was just funny that it actually came in the form of this animated film as well. I just thought it was like an interesting touch, and
I appreciate
and like
them.
Shigo also made so much like I was just like, you really thought Draken Monkey Fist and the
Duff Killigan.
Scottish golf
Duff Killigan.
Yes,
Duff with his Killigan exploding golf balls.
Going to take over the world.
I mean, but it is. I do appreciate the show. I appreciate the movie for like commenting on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I appreciate that the film was like even the fact that because like the whole point is that it's supposed to be a turn, right? Like, oh snap, it's the sidekick that did it all along. But like, I like that, and it's back into that like the type of humor of the show. Like that term of like, oh, and why didn't you think it would be the sidekick? Like clearly Shigo's the more intelligent one. Da, 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 da. Like, did you have that same thought that Kim had? Like you just assumed it was one of these guys, and yeah, like it does this good, the show, and then the the show and then the movie did a really good job of sort of noting just looking back on itself and keeping itself aware of the turns that were happening in its own plot lines and its own sort of discussions around these concepts and these like societal norms that they were attempting to if not break, address.
Because even Kim and Ron are automatically just like subverting that typical trope where like the woman is always the sidekick rather than the man, and that the woman is always just the dumb blonde, and this one it's the opposite.
We do love a dumb blonde man. They're so entertaining.
Ron said there are structure and rules to preschool. Okay?
Exactly. He was like, you cannot do that. Give her ball back. That is not okay.
That's not how preschool works. At all. I also loved how when Shigo took over, she was like, thinking is not allowed. Like,
there's a great moment where it's like where Bonnie, because Bonnie's the one running of course Bonnie, Kim's like arch rival of high school, is the one running the
brainwashing school.
Exactly, yeah, like the the attitude adjustment center or something of that nature. And she's running it, and she's like, so her first question's like all of the people brought in who are sitting in like classroom chairs, and she's like, which is also, now that I think about it, I mean, they literally do that in The Handmaid's Tale. Like they took that exact image and put it in The Handmaid's Tale. Mm-hmm. But anyway, like Bonnie's like, okay, so why, like, does anyone know why you're here? And one of the attendees raises his hand and he goes, I think, and then the ground just opens up and swallows him. And Bonnie is like, exactly. He thought. That's not okay. You don't think. Shigo doesn't think. The Supreme One thinks for you. And I just appreciated that. Like I do enjoy totalitarian humor. I know there's nothing funny about totalitarianism, but like there are also funny things about totalitarianism.
No, when they do it like this, it's hilarious. It's really funny, and then especially because it's like Shigo is just Shigo, and she's just such a great villain. I always want to give props to her for that. I think villains. Not that we need to celebrate villains, but like some of them are fun.
No, it's like the way we feel about Cruella de Vil. You know what I mean? You're like, but Cruella de Vil's incredible.
People are also doing a lot about Miss DeVille. I would just like to say that.
Are people like really upset about like because it's like animal cruelty or whatever?
I feel like it.
But that's the whole point, that they foil that. So
right.
So what's the problem? Like, yes, that was the villain.
Yeah, no, I know. But I'm just saying, I feel like that's like a big thing, is that it's because she wants to kill the animals. Which
but when you want to kill humans, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's when you want to kill the animals that it gets out of whack. You know how I feel.
Yeah. It's fine. But yeah, no, I do think it is a very interesting thing, and like props to Shigo, because she really worked that suit she was always wearing. Her hair always looked
mad good.
And she was always flipping around, And considering she was older than Kim Possible, I'm assuming, because she must have been like,
I think
a teenager.
The idea was she was supposed to be like mid-20s, I think, or like early 20s was the idea.
Oh yeah, we were also trying to figure out whether her and Dragon were supposed to be in a relationship
in the future.
In the future, yeah,
because it's like, because she like makes alterations to like his body for her. That it seems like the underlying idea is like for her own personal like pleasure. So I don't. That was a weird note. But here's the thing: when you're a kid, it doesn't matter. Like that stuff goes over your head, and it literally doesn't matter. But it was just something that we caught as older women watching it, and maybe on our own many times wishing that we could do things to partners' bodies to make our own pleasure a bit more realized. So I understood you, Shigo. I felt you in that moment. I got it.
I think another thing that we also noticed that we've talked about before, but like parents in these Disney movies really need to start telling their children when they're moving before the day that they are going to move.
Unnecessary trauma.
Truly, easily, like, how are you going to move internationally and tell your son we're going to Norway the next day?
Like, that was trauma. That was a choice. And I don't believe in trauma that's a choice. Like, don't do that.
Especially in Norway. Don't they I forgot what state they're supposed to be living in. I don't even know if they ever say it, but
I don't
like I'm
think they
like
do. Because he can't figure out if they're like, he can't tell French from Norwegian. So.
He also thinks Latin and Spanish. Poor Ron.
Poor Ron.
Poor Ron. He really thought they were gonna take Latin class and they were gonna be eating salsa.
Yeah. Oh.
And then Kim was like, Latin's a dead language, Ron. Like, what are you talking about?
And she's like, and so no J-Lo. Like, J-Lo's not going to be a part of this class.
What are you talking about, sir?
Oh, poor thing. We love Ron, though.
And I think one other thing that's actually come up over the years, because people have talked about it as well, is like the fact that Kim's like boobs are always pointy, and like that's just never addressed.
But everybody else's aren't. Like, that's the thing.
Like,
everyone else has like a curve situation go. But who knows? Like, maybe it's a thing of like, the idea is, real women have points, Like, I can be just as phallic as you in some regards.
It was just such an interesting like artist choice, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
To be like, points. Let's go with the points.
Yeah. I'm not mad at it though.
No, it's just so funny. So with that, Nina, do you think you would show this one to your kids?
Probably. I mean, also, this is important to mention. We like didn't bring this up. Like, so Kim Possible: A Stitch in Time, as of this moment, is not available to watch on any streaming services. This is very strange because Kim Possible, the series, is available on Disney Plus, and the other two Kim Possible original movies, Disney Channel original movies, like So the Drama, which is another animated one, and then the live action one that they did that we would really rather not speak of, in 2019, are all available on Disney Plus. It's only Kim Possible: Stitch in Time that's not available on Disney Plus, but it's also not available to rent anywhere. Like, no Apple TV, no Google Play, no Amazon, like, not available at all. So we had to purchase the DVD and find DVD players to watch it on. Thank God that I still have my old MacBook and it's functioning. So we had to purchase the DVD, and mind you, when we were purchasing it, there were only like 8 copies left, which means that a lot of people were purchasing this DVD, which is another strange state to exist in. But so we now own this individually. We both own copies of Kim Possible: Stitch in Time. So you best believe that my children are watching Kim Possible, and they are definitely watching A Stitch in Time. Just to make this purchase like have any type of like worth to it, and not just something I watched one time. But no, like, outside of that, all jokes aside, I still think that Kim Possible is like a banger. I think that it's an animated show that I would want to introduce my kids to. I was even watching it and I was thinking about sort of like the same thing with Even Stevens. I was like, I could watch this with my, like, next time that, my godson and his like little sister come over for like a sleepover, like, we should watch Kim Possible. Like, that'll be fun for us to do. So I'm already sort of in that headspace of, it's the type of show that I would want to introduce to watch with, my future offspring, if they exist. Hopefully they exist. And in that regard, like, I'm sure natural progression, we would definitely get to the movies. And and we have the DVD of this one, so they could literally watch it anytime, and I will never have to pay any more money for it. So, not mad at it being in the arsenal, right?
Yeah, there you go.
It's like why I am not getting rid of my VHS player, and I'm not getting rid of my DVD player. Like, in my real house, I'm sort of away from home at the moment, but like, for the simple reason that, like, there are like, when my kids want to watch Flubber, I'm not renting Flubber. I'm not doing that. Like, we go watch Flubber on the VHS because it's already been paid for. That's just how I feel. So, so I think that we'll definitely be watching it. I also just love, like, I think on this podcast, like, we have all realized by now that, you know, Nina loves animation. And then I think animation weirdly has a lot more sort of free space for kids to explore their own like interests and thoughts and considerations of the world around them than often live action allows. And so I'm really always here for like, oh, another anime thing that, you know, my kids can enjoy early on that I think fundamentally only teaches them useful things,
Right.
and useful ways of looking at the world.
No,
So,
I completely
yeah.
agree. I think I would definitely show this one to my children. As you said, we now have the DVDs, so there's really no excuse. Um, and yeah, I think like I think this is just such a I think the show is great. The movie followed suit in a way that I think didn't just feel like it was an extended episode. Which some of these animated movies we've talked about can definitely feel like that. Um, so I really enjoyed it, and I feel like children would definitely still enjoy it, and it could also be a good way to introduce them into the show. Because they pretty much you don't really have to like you'd get most of the jokes, I feel like, if you'd never seen the show,
Yeah.
but
It's pretty
um
self-explanatory.
yeah. So I feel like it's always it's still a fun one. Like I also feel like you really can't go wrong with like spy related children's stuff.
Yeah.
It's just always fun. And Kim is just a great character, and so is Ron, and yeah, you can't ever beat Rufus. So that's like a thing for children. He really had all of us convinced that naked mole rats were cute until we all looked them up on Google.
And then
And we
saw
were
them
like,
for what
that
they were.
is the
Oh
worst thing I've ever
god.
seen. It looks like the thing from Pan's
Atrocious.
Labyrinth that has to put his eyes in his hands.
And the worst part about it is like in this film, like so essentially Rufus has been cloned and like steroided up. And that's like what Rufus 3000 is that comes back to like talk to Kim. But when we get to the future, like there's like thousands of Rufuses like running around that are all like buffed up and steroided up, and they're like, "Oh, Rufus Prime!" Like they like worship him because he's the original Rufus. But like with that, like in the movie, cute. But because we have both now seen what naked mole rats look like in real life, while watching this film, we were like, "Oh my god, that is literally."
It's disturbing.
Like there's a part where I think they tie up like Draken and like drag him down, and I was just like, can you imagine if hundreds of muscly naked mole rats were crawling all over your body? Like you would lose your. Oh no, they tie down Monkey Fist. Like you would lose your mind. It would be so. But the show, like, it made us love them and believe in them. So
Yeah.
you know,
it worked. It worked. You know. It also made us all love Bueno Nacho.
it did. It did. Bueno Nacho.
And I think with that, guys, we'll have to catch you next week. Call us, beep us if you want to reach us.
Thanks again for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.